I remember going into my first ayahuasca ceremony and I had my intention all planned and, I was... And then I remember sitting there and they're going around the circle and everyone's speaking their intention out loud. And I say my intention, it just, came out of me quite easily. And then I heard myself speaking and it was literally, I was hearing the words as they were coming out of my mouth. There hadn't been no prior thought. And I just remember hearing myself say, I want to know immortality. I just always say to people, fuck, don't ask for that. It's like...
Chaos.
Which, of course, became, in hindsight, when I put together the pieces, with my father dying and my partner, the love of my life, dying, I understood how it was really perfect in preparation.
On this week's podcast episode, I talk with the Psychedelics superstar, Simone on all things plant medicine and psychedelics. We talk about the importance of integration when it comes to psychedelics, the ego, allowing the plant to do the work, dissolving the ego as we know it, the importance of good practitioners when it comes to psychedelics, and much, much more. Enjoy the episode. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Momentum Lifestyle Podcast by myself, Blake Worrell-Thompson.
And me, Genoa Van Keekum. Momentum is a men's wellbeing and performance community dedicated to helping men be better.
Each week, we deep dive with your favourite thought leaders and experts from around the world to get their insights to help you be better. Enjoy the episode. Now, guys, before we get started on this week's podcast, I want to talk to you about our Momentum Mastermind. The Mastermind is our 12-month program for men who want to surround themselves with other committed men, all with similar interests, values, and goals. Whether you're looking to build or grow a profitable lifestyle business, develop financial freedom, get in the best shape of your life, or create an intimate and epic relationship, the Mastermind is perfect for those who are looking to have it all. We know that to create these results and this kind of lifestyle on your own can be super challenging. So join now for your free 30-day trial. Simply visit our website, www.themomentumlifestyle.com.au. Up the top, you'll see a section for programs. Click on the programs, you'll see our mastermind, and you can sign up there now for your free 30-day trial valued at $1,000. We look forward to seeing you part of the mastermind. Simone Surgener, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Lots for us to talk about today, in particular about one of my favourite subjects, psychedelics. And before we get started, can you give the guys a 60 to 90 second spiel of who you are and what's got you to where you are today?
Okay, I will try and keep it short. So I'm born and bred in Melbourne. Did live overseas in the States for 6 years. I've been back for 4 years. I'm the mother of 4 daughters, ranging from 25 down to 10. So I've had a lot of parenting experience. I've been a therapist for almost 20 years and working with people's emotional issues, trauma, limiting beliefs, programs, cellular memories, you name it. I've studied lots of different modalities. And my journey's taken me into many different spheres, Tantra for 10 years, business coaching, hypnotherapy, and lots of study of natural medicine. And then I started my own psychedelic journey on myself about almost a decade ago. So.
Beautiful. That's quite succinct, actually. Well done. I am really interested in psychedelics, and at some stage maybe we'll talk about my experience, but I'm really interested in starting with the journey that you opened yourself up to 10 years ago, which is becoming increasingly popular, which is a good thing for both you and I with our beliefs around it. What was the catalyst for you to explore that 10 years ago, and where did you start when it came to your own journey?
Sure. Well, having been a therapist for almost 2 decades, I love to read anything to do with self-awareness, self-development, psychology. And so I'd come across at least 15 years ago, if not more, articles about LSD being used in psychotherapy in the 60s. And that always quite fascinated me. And I did have a lot of fear around drugs, which, some people still hold on to. And, we're not going to go into the history of psychedelics and war on drugs and everything, but I also grew up quite religious. And there was drug addiction and abuse in my surrounding family. So I'd seen the very negative side of that. So I had a lot of caution. But being someone who's very practical minded, and I love research. I love knowledge. I understood that LSD was non-addictive and that you couldn't overdose on it. And it had been used very successfully in psychotherapy. So I always had this thing in the back of my mind. If I was ever to do something, it would be LSD. So that is literally where my journey started 10 years ago with my husband at the time in the States. He'd never done drugs either, and he wanted to explore it for creative purposes. So we did our first trip together. And I will never forget my first trip because I laughed nonstop for the first hour or more, and I could not stop laughing. And my husband kept on saying, "Why are you laughing? Why?" I couldn't stop. I couldn't even answer him. And then after I finally calmed down, I said, "My brain on drugs is exactly the same as my brain off drugs." I couldn't, there was no filters. I always sort of inhabit that kind of space. And I always think that way, but I just, have learned to adapt to human society in, various ways. So that was my first experience. I'd also learned about ayahuasca a few years before that and was very, very, very keen to do ayahuasca. But at the time I was pregnant, then breastfeeding, then pregnant, then breastfeeding. So now knowing what I know about plant medicine and being steeped in it, that wouldn't bother me if I was breastfeeding. But at the time, because I didn't know anything about it, I was very cautious. So I kind of was, really aching to do ayahuasca for a good 3-4 years before I did it. And as I've come to appreciate and learn, and maybe, you concur that I think the plant medicine calls you at a certain particular time. And so I did, I did ayahuasca not long after, maybe a year or two after I did LSD.
And if anyone ever asks me about psychedelics, there's probably two things I say, and I'm interested in learning from the likes of yourself. There'd be two things that I'd say is take your time finding the right practitioner and wait until you feel called. Like those are absolute no-brainers.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they make a big difference to one's overall experience. For me, I've probably been in 15 to 20 different environments, whether it's MDMA therapy, whether it's Aya, whether it's San Pedro, whether it's mushrooms, even Cambo. And the environment and the energy of the room is like game changer to what you're likely to experience. Can you talk a little bit to that and whether even for yourself there's been environments that have been good and potentially ones that maybe not so good?
I'm very fortunate that I've never been in a not good environment. I tend to be very blessed that I choose very carefully and very wisely, as you said. And I'm going to add to this and lead to it that the other thing I believe is the importance of integration and support afterwards.
100%.
So I have worked with a couple of people in Australia with ayahuasca and San Pedro, and they do it quite indigenously ceremonies, but they're beautiful people, both separately, a man and a woman. And I've done a number of ceremonies with them. But my first ayahuasca ceremony, and it's quite a story, and I don't know if I'm going to go quite down that track, but I was very, my first one was so intense. I can't even describe how intense it was. And I got to see the perfection of it later because a week later my dad died unexpectedly. And then 6 weeks later my partner and the father of my younger children died. So I can look back and see how perfect it was that ayahuasca was breaking me because she knew what was coming that was going to break me. But at the time, it was so brutal, I can imagine. And for a week afterwards, I was in complete dysregulation and terror, absolutely terror. And then I'm saying this because I think that there's so much hype around psychedelics and it's all rainbows and unicorns and, a magic bullet and it's going to fix everything in one session. And I'm like, yeah, that could happen, but there's a lot of hype around that expectation. And the only reason I got through that week was because I'd already had a decade as a therapist and having done so much work on myself and supported so many other people and been on so many retreats. I knew that state of dissolution and terror, but it doesn't mean it's easy to cope with when you're in it. And I didn't have support. It's not to make wrong my practitioners that I go to, but they don't necessarily offer that.
Yeah.
And I was like, excuse me, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I was just
go for it, please.
I was like fuck, if someone like me can be tipped that, much into a state of absolute terror and disintegration, I can't imagine someone with less resources internally or externally, how they would go. And that's not to say everyone's experience is going to be like that. But I became very aware, and I've always been like this, and it doesn't matter whether it's in, Tantra retreats or self-development retreats. I think often there is a lack of ongoing support afterwards. And so that was always in the back of my mind. But having said that, I am a bit of a psychonaut. And so I have been, like when I lived in the States, I was in Mexico for a number of months twice, and did lots of peyote ceremonies there with the Murakami from the Huichol tribe, which are the keepers of the peyote, and did it very indigenously. And they have really beautiful ceremonies around that and sweat lodges afterwards. And there's a different holding and a container when you're doing it in an Indigenous ceremony. I also did Native American ones in teepee. But one of the things, and I'm sorry, I know I'm digressing, but one of the things that I think is very, very important about integration and support after a ceremony or an experience is that a lot of people, especially if they're doing group ones, and they have taken a lot of the sort of Indigenous style, whether it's drums or singing or, different aspects of it, and sort of quite, shamanic and everything. And that's beautiful. I don't have a problem with that. And I actually really love it, even from an anthropological point of view. But if they've taken it out of the context of the tribe and the community, and then they take people out of this modern world, and then the people go back to the modern world, and they don't have the inbuilt support and structure and integration that naturally comes from tribal communities. So you can't just take the ceremony and the rituals and do all that and then just throw people back into our modern life, which is inherently rife with so many issues, which have caused people to seek out psychedelic support in the first place, and think that they're going to cope because they don't have that tribal community support and natural integration that comes from, a certain contextual belief system that these tribes and communities have. So one of the things that, caused me to become a practitioner and offering psychedelic work with people was just this feeling around the lack of integration and support. And I'm not speaking for all practitioners, and I'm not, speaking for all medicine people, but I did see that. And as psychedelics have become even more and more popular, I think that we're going to see a lot more shadow sides. And so I am just 100% about integration and support afterwards, beforehand. And the studies show as well that doing psychedelics alongside therapy yield the best results. So I think I lost track of the original question.
I can't remember what it was.
I enjoyed what you had to say. So when you talk about integration, and it's a term that's used a lot in kind of the work, what exactly do you mean by integration for those that are new to this term? And what does integration potentially look like before and after in terms of, one, your experience, but two, your offering as well? Like, what does that look like?
I'm going to talk about what I do because everybody works different and there are different models of care. So I'm not saying that this is the only right way. And a lot of it, you talked a little bit about set and setting and how important that is. So I think a lot of that's going to be relative to the set and setting, the practitioner, the ceremony. Obviously, it's different if it's one-on-one as opposed to group. So, and you've got your more clinical models now and you've got your more Indigenous models. So, integration is something that I think that people have to figure out what that means for them if they're a medicine man or woman, but also someone seeking that level of support. Like, as you said, it's so important to find the right practitioner. And there could be lots of different practitioners out there that are good, but it doesn't mean they're all good for you. So it's very important to understand your needs going into this and the level of support that you require. I think I'm fortunate that by the time I ended up doing this kind of work, I had a long, career as a therapist behind me. So it was very easy for me to integrate those two. I do a protocol call, consultation call with someone where I get their history, figure out, there's certain caveats, that I always ask questions, whether they're on antidepressants, suicidal ideation, history of psychosis, those kind of standard things, which I mean, they're standard to me, but it's amazing how many it's not standard to other people. And and then get their history and their intent, like why they want to do it. I can't speak enough about how important it is, the intention of the person coming in, so that I can get an idea of where they're at emotionally, mentally, physically, their physical health as well. I'm not the kind of practitioner that just gives everybody the same dose. I've never worked like that as a therapist. Every single person that comes to me is an individual, and I'm creating a synergistic relationship with them. So I support them on their journey to find their own truth on that they're to prescribe. And so that means always, each person's a fresh person and getting to know them. And then, so even like sensitivity, like some people have done a lot of work, or they're very sensitive energetically. Some people have never done anything, and have a lot of fear or anxiety, or a lot of like high expectations. And I often say, like, with this work now, a lot of it's modifying expectations. I try and get a gauge. And then I also work very intuitively, and I have a fair sense before I take someone into, and here we're talking about a macro journey one-on-one, the dose that I'm going to give them. I also work with microdosing, so I work in a similar way with helping people microdose. And then there's the actual ceremony and the actual day when they do it. And again, that's always different. It's different for every single person. Some people need that big experience, like they need a sort of big dose to really crack them open, give them, sort of blast them. That's not common. A lot of people think that's what they're going to get. It's actually not most of the time. With other people, I tend to do it more sort of the way, I've experienced it in plant ceremonies, like with ayahuasca and San Pedro and peyote, where you give them a dose and then a few hours in you give them another dose and kind of even it out. And then the integration is afterwards, like as they're coming down afterwards, helping them integrate their experience. That looks different for each person depending on the kind of experience they've had. And then I offer a 1 hour integration call within a week to 2 weeks afterwards. So they can do a call with me. But I also offer access. I'm accessible anytime. They can text me, call me, email me anytime if they need any ongoing support. And I make myself available as much as I can. And of course, then if they want to, there's always more therapy sessions they can book on. But as in terms of like the actual one experience, all that's involved.
You mentioned in there people's expectations when they go into ceremony or plant medicine. What's the value of setting an intention, but also having enough flexibility to let it go as you kind of go into ceremony?
Absolutely. I think because we're working on so many different levels, and we're going to maybe go a little bit out here now, but I'm very interested in working with people on an energetic level. So that to me is the most important thing, and working with their pure essence and helping them come back to source within and, source without, whatever, external, whatever that looks or means to that person. And also the connectivity that plant medicine provides to our whole cosmos and our earth. So what I've noticed is that when people set an intention, and it happens quite naturally and organically, but their body and their soul starts cooking leading up to the ceremony. So things start stirring, like, the pot starts stirring within, emotionally, mentally, physically. And I think it's just this beautiful, I love metaphors, but it's this kind of tilling of the soil in preparation for something new to arise and be planted. And so the intention, I think it also gives people a focus, because when you go under the influence of psychedelics, it would be very easy to get lost. And again, this modifying of expectations is helping people to understand, the visuals and the lights and the colours and everything, that can all be exciting and fun. Watching droplets of water when you go to wash your hands in the bathroom, like all that kind of thing is magical and it's a beautiful experience, but that's not what they're there for. And so an intention also can help keep them focused on, I'm here to, do my deep inner work, to look at something, to evolve, to transform, to let go, to heal. And it helps that. But it's amazing too, and I've had this experience myself, and I definitely had this with my first ayahuasca experience, where you can have an intention going in. You can be thinking about it for weeks leading up and the days, especially the days before. And then you get to the actual ceremony day and about to take your medicine, and some other really strong intention or something can come up that you didn't even know was there. But like I said, you've been cooking and then it's like this ripeness and then just bang, you're open and ready. So it's part of definitely the preparation of readiness.
One of the things that can make a journey really challenging is fighting the truth of what is. And you spoke about letting go. So what's the importance of trying to, whether it's the ego or other elements that get involved, what's the importance and the significance of letting go and being really intimate with reality and exactly the experience that you're getting?
Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm going to speak to my own personal experience here. It was interesting when I did my first ayahuasca experience, and this was good 8 years ago, I think now. I'd been aware for a couple of years because I'd done so much work on myself and I thought I was so good at surrendering and, being with the unknown. I really actually prided myself on that. But then sort of like the year or two before I did it, I remember saying to my partner at the time, I was like, there's something within me that there's just this like will to fight, that will not submit, will not surrender. And I knew it was to my detriment. But I couldn't identify it. And it was this kind of thing that I couldn't fix it. I couldn't make it go away. And so I remember going into my first ayahuasca ceremony and I had my intention all planned and, I was, and then I remember sitting there and they're going around the circle and everyone's speaking their intention out loud. And I say my intention, it just came out of me quite easily. And then I heard myself speaking and it was literally, I was hearing the words as they were coming out of my mouth. There hadn't been no prior thought. And I just remember hearing myself say, I want to know immortality. I just always say to people, fuck, don't ask for that. It's like
chaos.
Which of course became, in hindsight, when I put together the pieces, with my father dying and my partner, the love of my life dying, I understood how it was really perfect in preparation. But I had the most intense experience. And it was also my first plant experience too. So that can also be intense. But it was literally like ayahuasca. And, for listeners that aren't familiar, ayahuasca is considered the feminine archetype. And so it was literally like she had my head on the ground and was just grinding it and grinding it and grinding it and literally saying, do you give up? And I'll be like, yes, I give up. And she would just keep on doing it and keep on doing it. Like the level of absolutely breaking me into submission was intense. And then I saw myself on this karmic wheel of life where I was, a pauper, a king, a washerwoman, a princess, a philosopher. I just saw myself being born again and again. And it was like a merry-go-round. And I often get the circus music when I do these ceremonies. And it was just literally making me sick, dizzy. And I was like, I want to get off. I want to get off. I want to get off the ride. I don't want to do this human life thing anymore. And the words that she said to me was, you don't get off until I say you get off. And it was just this total, absolute facing that I have no control over anything. But it was so beautiful. And the reason I'm speaking to this with resistance is I've had resistance come up a number of times in ceremonies, particularly with ayahuasca. I don't know why, more with ayahuasca than any. And what I've learned personally is that resistance isn't always something that you can mentally say I'm prepared. You can mentally say I'm ready to let go. You can emotionally feel you're ready to let go. And there's certain programs within the physical body, within maybe our soul's journey and without our own psychological makeup that are there for a reason. And then there's a specific time when they're going to be removed. And so I've learned, especially with ayahuasca, that when my last ayahuasca journey was only about 8-9 months ago, I had massive resistance come up. And I'm practiced enough now to go, oh, okay, I don't want to give in. I don't want to give control of my body, mind over to some other, entity. But I breathe into it now, and I've learned to ask for her to be gentle and tender with me. She doesn't have to break me anymore, that, you know, but it's not within my control to even give that up. So last time it was very much, it was like she was undoing locks down the back of my head and down my spine. And there were programs that had been installed, for want of a better word, that I didn't know were there, but she knew hadn't removed them. And that's the thing I love about plant medicine. You don't have to do all the figuring out. You don't have to do all the hours of meditation and all the learning and the psychotherapy and analyzing everything to death and consciously going, I'm going to get rid of this and I'm going to work on this. Like, the plants do it for you because they know far beyond our own knowing what's there and how to do it and in what order and sequence and how to do it gently and beautifully. So I often encourage my clients, I do say, the more resistant you are, the harder the trip's going to be, the more pleasant it's going to be. So do your best. But it's also face the scary thing. If you see demons or the devil or whatever, they're metaphors for things, your own fears. And so I always say, you know, ask for that to show you why it's there, why it's appearing to you. But I always say, ask the medicine for help. Speak to the mushroom, speak to ayahuasca, speak to the, you know, cacti, and ask them to, you know, support you and help you. And that makes a massive difference when you really, really start to accept that they're your allies, that they're there to really support you.
I had someone I posted about psychedelics this week. I don't know if you saw it on Instagram and Facebook. And I had someone, which appears to be a slightly ignorant statement, going, oh, you shouldn't talk about this. It might lead to an addiction. And I was like, if you've experienced ayahuasca, there is not one person that is interested in being addicted to that shit. It is fucking chaos.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think you can be a little bit addicted to seeking that high. It's not addictive in terms of craving it.
Yeah.
But I think that you can be addicted psychologically to the peak experience, which is another reason why I'm really, really, really strong in integration and support. So going back to following up with integration is you have this amazing peak experience. You have all these epiphanies and insights and see all these connections and dissolving of ego and construct and rewiring, resetting. But none of that truly means anything, doesn't matter how profound it is, if you don't take it and embody it in your everyday life. And that is the discipline. That's the practice. That's where you want to have your support network, whether it's your mentors or your coaches or your therapists or, you know, it's, you know, a lot of my clients come to me and they have their own psychiatrists and psychologists. And I say, tell them what you're doing. Make sure that they know and know how to support you afterwards. And not all of them are equipped to do that. But it's just so important that you start to integrate it and bring it into your everyday life. And that's where the transformation work truly is.
You spoke earlier about the shadow side of this work, and naturally with a really fast growth over probably the last 5 to 7 years, it does leave this whole space open for a lot of kind of disruption, shadow side of it. What do you see as the shadow side of psychedelics, and how do we keep it clean, keep the containers safe? And if someone wanted to explore this, what would be kind of prerequisites, do you think, for them to kind of step into this space?
That's a huge question.
That's a loaded question. So here you go.
That's really big. I just, like a month ago, I was at the entheogenesis conference in Melbourne. And yeah, there was discussions around that as well. And I think, for one, I welcome talk about the shadow side. I think we need that level of transparency. I think it's really complex because unless it's someone like you and I who've probably been in the psychedelic paradigm for a long time, and if you read lots of articles and you've been watching the space, you've seen a lot of these things evolve. For someone coming along who's new, I'm very cautious about confusing them because there's just so much that's happened and so much growth. Human nature is human nature is human nature. We're going to play out all the same games and archetypes and shadows in the psychedelic space as we do in any other area of life. So we've always had your snake oil salesman. We've always had your, unfortunately, psychiatrists and psychologists who, abuse their patients. We've got doctors and, the medical system that can do so much wonderful work and also cause so much damage. To think that it's not going to be happening or isn't already happening in the psychedelic sphere is just pure ignorance. And again, this is about managing expectations. So I'm very much about educating my clients, encouraging self-education. But a lot of the time it's just using your common sense, your wisdom, trusting your intuition, and really sort of helping people just be really practical minded about that. And so, like a lot of people come to me, and I think the danger is that a lot of people who are trying psychedelics have been on a long path often of trying so many different things and have not got any deep true healing. So there's a level of desperation, or this is my last hope. And that can be so easily abused, unfortunately. So it's like trauma-informed has become a bit of a buzzword in the last few years as well. Any practitioner, I've seen in the Tantra community, I was in that for a long time, that just because somebody's got qualifications or even experience doesn't mean that they're necessarily equipped to handle a lot of these things that come up. I think a really good practitioner is one who will actually say, I'm not right for you. That, that has the ability to say, I think you would be better off going down this track, or, this is not the right time. Because I'm very careful who I work with, because I have to be right for them and they have to be right for me. It's a very deep, intimate relationship that you go into with the client, especially working in this very vulnerable, intimate space. So I think it's about learning to ask the right questions. And there are things on the internet where people can look up, what kind of questions to ask when you're seeking out a practitioner. Trust your intuition, trust the resonance that you feel. How much are they trying to sell themselves or sell the psychedelics? What kind of questions are they asking you, and how do they respond when you're asking them questions? And take time to think about it. I really encourage most people. They come with this eagerness or this anticipation or expectations or desperation. And, it's always good for people just to have a consultation with someone and then go away and think about it and just feel what it feels like in their body afterwards.
It's hard to go wrong if you have deep attunement to your deep knowing. It's really hard to go wrong.
Yeah.
I think society, if we can get back to that place, there'll be people asking a lot more questions about a lot more systems and structures that we have in the world.
But that's always been my approach, is that I'm helping people find their inner truth. I'm not interested in imparting my truth. I can share my experience and my knowledge and my wisdom that I've gained, but, and that might help, but I'm there to support them finding their own answers. So that's a good way of also, finding the right person for you is the person trying to prescribe and tell you what to do and what it's going to look like and how it should be? Or are they helping to elicit, more of you finding your own way and path through it? It's a little bit different, I think, when it's larger ceremonies, because often it's still good, or you should always, speak to the person holding the ceremony. But I think a lot of people sometimes go to those things because someone else brings them along, or they said it was really good and they had a really good experience, so they go on to the next group one. It's a little, I think we're talking about different things too with group. It's still the same. You should be just as cautious, but it can be a different experience in a group as opposed to one-on-one.
Yeah, 100%. You spoke earlier about essentially your 10-year journey and experiences with different psychedelics. What have you tried personally, and how have you seen them impact you, the way that you show up in the world and the way that you view the world?
Okay.
Loaded question again.
No, it's a good question. I like that question. I don't know that I've sat and thought about it. I think different plant medicines have different personalities. This is the way I can describe it. So for generalization, everyone's going to have their own experience through their own filters and their own essence and what they're here to have in their soul's journey. So it's always relative, but I think there's a general consensus that ayahuasca is more the divine feminine, and peyote and San Pedro are the divine masculine. So I've really enjoyed having experiences with both of them and exploring how that is my own interrelatedness, both internally with my own internal masculine and feminine, but also externally, like how I've showed up. It's really definitely changed the way I understand myself, understand my relationship with men and women, how we show up in the world. This is a little side point, but I remember I'd only worked, most of them had been medicine men, so I'd only worked with men with peyote and ayahuasca, and then I did an ayahuasca ceremony, and I've done it a couple of times now with a Brazilian woman, and it was a really different experience having a medicine woman. I found the energy quite different, not just because it was working with ayahuasca. And it's funny, I've had that now reflected back to me that there's, maybe it's changing, maybe I'm wrong, but, a lot of women have said, oh, there's not many women working in this space, and they've really appreciated. And so the men that I work with, having a feminine essence delivering the medicine is also going to be a different experience. And so this goes back to, there's the medicine, but then there's the person who prepares the medicine, this person, serves the medicine and the space that they create. So I'm definitely bringing a lot of my own essence as well to the experience, which is not better or worse. It's an experience at the end of the day. So, so I spoke to this medicine woman. I said, oh, how come after I do peyote, I don't feel as trashed physically, or like it's not as intense as when I do ayahuasca? And she said, and this could be a generalization, maybe you might agree it's true or not, because I'd seen in peyote ceremonies a lot of men throwing up, but I'd never felt as sick or throwing up in peyote. But in ayahuasca, I always found that very intense, physical. I would throw up and purge. And she said, because when a man's working with the masculine, it's going to be much more intense for him because it's bringing up a lot of, his identity with his own masculinity. And when a woman's working with ayahuasca and the feminine, it's going to be more intense for her because it's bringing up a lot of her self-identity. I thought, that was really interesting. And I've played with, that as well. I was a bit later to mushrooms, and I started microdosing myself with mushrooms. That's how I came to that. So I did that for about 18 months and then did my own first solo, my first macro, and it was a first solo. So I'd done enough plant ceremonies that I was like, okay, I'm going to take the hero's dose of mushrooms. I took 5 grams on my own at home. Oh, my God. Even though I sort of knew what to expect, it was still like taking it on your own is definitely a hero's journey. So that was really full on. But, and of course, now that I work with mushrooms and clients, one of the things that I love about mushrooms in some Indigenous cultures, I think it might have been the Aztecs, I could be wrong, that they call them the holy children. And I find that mushrooms have a much more playful energy, sometimes mischievous, and a little bit more chaotic, but in a beautiful, cosmic chaos way, but also very, very grounded because, of course, they're connected to all the mycelium, the internet of Earth. So I find they very much, people ask me what to expect or what they'll get out of it. And again, it's generalization. Everybody gets something different personally, but I find the common theme with people, myself as well, mushrooms take you back to that state of your innocence, like when you were a child, like who you are at your most pure, unadulterated self. They remind you that, this is who I've always been, and I am good enough just as me. And I'm not saying that ayahuasca and peyote and San Pedro can't do that, but it's at a different level. I just find that they're working on very multiple realities and different levels. I find, and this is my personal experience, ayahuasca can be quite universal. And mushrooms are just much more about being in your human body, on the earth, connected to the planet, and it's all okay. Like all of it is perfectly okay. So they kind of, there's more your micro experiences.
Beautiful. We could talk for hours. I fucking love this subject, but we won't. If people want to find out about you, the work that you do, anything that we've spoken about today, where's the best spot for them to find you?
Probably best just to contact me through my website, which is www.saksana.com.au. I'm on Facebook as well. They can message me through there. So shoot me an email. That's the best way.
Beautiful. And to speak to your work, I've had some people in your world who are very impressed with the work that you do. So I appreciate the impact that you're having and the work that you do.
Oh, it's been a pleasure to connect with you as well. And I love that you're really in a very, and yeah, I want to commend you too on just a very level-headed way, because I did listen to some of your other podcasts. The way you're approaching this space, I think that we need more of that, just this really calm, present, practical, level-headed, but, you know, also encompassing the beauty and the sacredness and the out there-ness of psychedelics. It's a very balanced approach, so thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Simone.
Okay, bye.